Hi again. Dwight Wilson, Armageddon Now. The chapter, The Certainty of Survival. That's page 166 of Armageddon Now. Wilson says about the Arab-Israeli conflict already going strong in the late 40s and early 50s, and the Christian reaction to it. He's made the point that Christians, evangelicals, have mixed feelings about this. He says, striving for fulfillment, including conspiring with the former imperialistic powers, Britain and France, to attack Egyptian territory in 1956, Britain hoped to regain control of the Suez Canal, which had been nationalized by Egypt. France hoped to eliminate Egyptian support of Algerian rebels in North Africa, and Israel wished to eliminate the Egyptian military threat and harassment and to annex more territory. Egypt's President Nasser had been building his military might with Czechoslovakian armaments, and as a consequence, the United States had withdrawn American financing of the Aswan Dam. Nasser had, in turn, responded by nationalizing the canal to get revenue and to assert his independence of the West. In accordance with a secret agreement signed at Sèvres, France, on October 23rd, the Israelis attacked Egypt on October 29th, and the British and French occupied the Canal Zone on November the 5th. The United Nations General Assembly had passed a ceasefire resolution on November 1st, however, which had been supported both by Russia and the United States. The United States had very cautiously avoided participation in the Suez adventure because of our own criticism of the recent Russian intrusion in Hungary. Finally, the threat of Russian atomic retaliation brought a truce agreement which lengthened into a peace which lasted until 1967. The premillenarian reaction to the Suez crisis was based upon their belief in an extended millennial kingdom of Israel which would reach from the Euphrates to the Nile. Back in 1950, Biola's vice president, William W. Orr, Biola being the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, by the way, still around, Orr had commented on a border dispute which Israel was having with Jordan, the Arabs claiming Israel had invaded the land in violation of the truce agreement. Quote, "It is to be expected that by one means or another the Israeli government will come into full possession of the borders of the ancient Holy Land, according to the scriptures." End of quote. Seemingly this implied that the predetermined ends justified one means or another. W. E. Vine, yes, the famous Vine who wrote the Vine's Expository Dictionary, Vine, writing in the British Plymouth Brethren journal, The Witness, spoke of the ultimate expansion to the Euphrates, even though he did not believe in the Zionist movement as the road to national redemption. Israeli expansion was also inherent in the premillenarian expectation of the rebuilding of the temple. A 1952 editorial in The King's Business bluntly stated, quote, "Next in order for Israel will be the complete jurisdiction over Jerusalem, the destruction of the Mosque of Omar, the building of a great temple, and the reestablishment of their ancient worship." End of quote. The writer believed that his own generation would witness these, quote, "thrilling events," unquote. Moody Institute's President Culbertson, in a 1953 article, "God's Clock Ticks On in the Holy Land," expressed this determinism: history guided not by an invisible hand, but by an invisible trumpet. Quote, "Someday, perhaps much sooner than we think, an invisible trumpet may sound, and modern Israel, perhaps not quite knowing why, will move into old Jerusalem as its ruler." End of quote. That would then bring to an end the times of the Gentiles. This was the background that predisposed the premillenarian mind to accept an expanding Israel. The Sunday School Times gave the strongest support to Israel's actual attack on Egypt and the strongest criticism to the failure of the United States to support the Israeli expansion. George T.B. Davis claimed that the reason Britain had lost her empire and was on the verge of bankruptcy was that she had failed to bless the Jews. He also had dire predictions for the United States. This is what Davis said, quote, is the United States to be the next nation to fall from her present exalted position through her failure to help Israel in this crucial hour when she is surrounded by foes bent on her destruction? We are standing at the crossroads of this at this very moment. Will our leaders believe God's word and take the road of blessing that will lead our nation to still greater glory and victory? Or will we forsake God's word and take a stand against the Jews and so bring upon us terrible judgments of God, as in the case of Egypt, Spain, Germany, and Great Britain? And that question, by the way, is still being asked in evangelical circles. Here we are, nearly 70 years later. Davis was not able to rise above measuring greatness only in terms of materialism and nationalism, assuming that God, not greed, had made the nation rich and powerful. But he now impugned the motives of the United States. Quote, "Is the oil of the Middle East more important than the blessing of God? As a nation, let us take a firm stand to help and strengthen the Jews in the state of Israel." End of quote. It did not necessarily follow, however, that the Arab cause was unjust. There was always the possibility that the United States might support the Arabs as much for the justice of their cause as for the oil interests. Davis appealed to readers to pray that the leaders of the United States would have the right attitude toward Israel in this crisis hour in order to bring blessing on America. Another writer in the Sunday School Times, in a series in late 1957, said that prior to the Suez crisis, an attack on Israel from Egyptian-held Gaza was a constant threat, and consequently, even if the Israeli attack was not justifiable, it was understandable. He observed that if Israel was not able to cultivate the Negev in the south, then it would be natural for her to seize some land from Jordan, which did so little with it. He went further to say, quote, "War seems inevitable, and the extension of Israel's borders as a result is probably unavoidable." End of quote. Such expressions prepared the premillenarian mind for further land grabs in 1967. The editor of the Evangel magazine spoke of Israel's bitter feeling because of the leniency of the United Nations toward the Arabs. He lamented that Israel had to face the threat of sanctions, but nothing had come of Arab violations of international law. Quote, "Evidently they were too big, too hard to handle, whereas little Israel was at the mercy of the UN, so it could be pressured to help salve a bad UN conscience." Unquote. He called the Israeli attack a, quote, "rash decision," which would put them in a worse predicament than before, because now the Arabs and the Russians were united against them. Nevertheless, he explained this as possibly a part of God's plan which might hasten the day of Russia's prophetic invasion of Palestine. God had secret weapons in reserve for that battle, and he would rescue little Israel from the monster Gog. A later article entitled "Israel Today and Tomorrow" expressed confidence that the Jews would never be uprooted from the land and recalled the 1948 statement of one of the pastors in the city of Jerusalem. Quote, "I saw miracles of God's intervention in behalf of the Jews as great as anything that happened in the campaigns under Joshua." Unquote. It would certainly be fascinating to know what that pastor saw that compared to the Battle of Jericho or the sun standing still. The author's comment, however, showed no sign of cynicism. Quote, "God gave the Jews the victory, and he will do it again." Well, I'll put a link into a playlist that we have on peace and security, a very big topic for Jehovah's Witnesses and others. We did several videos on this already, covering much of 1 Thessalonians. So we'll put the first of those videos on your screen, plus the peace and security playlist. See you next time.